you truly do have within you more potential than you realize, to the extent that you can trust yourself, because you truly do got this. You got this.
I'm Amy Woodall, and this is Conscious Habit, a show from the People Forward Network, teaching you how to incorporate love and consciousness at work, home, and the world at large. You just heard from Deseri Garcia. Des is a leadership development and team building coach, certified yoga and meditation instructor, and my partner in making life-changing experiences through our High Vibe Tribe retreats. But most importantly, she is someone who gives more damns than I can count and truly practices everything that she preaches. I'm so excited to share this conversation with you. Des has taught me so much about living authentically and leaning into the shit that really works. I quote her daily, including so many times on this podcast, but this time you're going to get to hear those phrases directly from the source, along with the stories of where they came from and the positive effect they can have on your life and mindset. But first, let's talk about consciousness and its evolution. Conscious Habit listeners, it's a gift to be able to interview, fireside chat, kind of riff with our guest today. She has been a longtime friend. I would even say a mentor in many ways and a partner in some really exciting things that we have in the world. Miss Des Garcia is with us today. Deseri. How'd I do? I feel like
You
people
did
always call
great.
you Desiree or Desiree, and it's Des, right? Desiree.
It is. Yeah. Yeah, you got it.
I've seen many people call you many names, and never have I ever heard you say, no, this is how you say
Yeah.
it.
That, Amy, that comes from coming from a big family, right? I was typically called Peppy, which was our dog. So, when your mom, as a mom, you
Yes.
run through all the names. And so I always say, hey, I'm not going to get attached to that. But I just want to say, I'm just wildly excited to be able to fireside chat with you. There are people in your lives that you just know they're never going to be very far from you, like it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Just imagine my hands around your ankles because you're not shaking me. And you're that person for me. So thrilled to be here.
I feel that too. Listeners, I don't know if you're into astrology or not. I don't know a ton about it, but I do know that Des and I are fellow Libras. And so that's something that just connects us to our core and our sisterhood. And the projects and the things that we've done together, we're so like-minded and like-hearted. And I've learned so many things from Des. I start off with every, one of these podcasts asking our guest, what does consciousness mean to you? And so I can't wait to hear your definition. I don't know that I've ever asked you that question out in the real world.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. Of course, love the question. Consciousness to me is like a spiral because I think that it rises like a point in time. So if you imagine driving a car to the top of a mountain, you're going to come kind of past that point where you started at a higher level each time. To me, consciousness is full present awareness, and the rising pieces as we learn and grow and discover and have those experiences that, like the beautiful ones that bring us to our knees and the beautiful ones that crack open our heart, right? They're both beautiful and perfect. Those cause a different rise in our level of consciousness.
What a great explanation. What a great visual as well. And I think, as I am wrapping my mind around your definition, that it isn't about never having bad times. It's more about finding the beauty in all of it.
Yeah, I believe that everything happens for a reason. And this comes from one of my teachers, and that reason is good. Even in the hard tragedies, there is something that comes from that. And ultimately it's good.
Cy Wakeman mentioned that when she was on the podcast and in her book that she has out, where she's like, you may not be able to find gratitude when you're in it, but afterwards there will be some light that's like, oh, it was meant for me. I just couldn't see it then. And even if I don't feel good about it, I can still recognize that it was still meant for me to get here and to move along my journey.
Yeah. I remember hearing her say that, and it really resonated for me.
So there's like 3 or 4 other things. I have a keynote. So as we're recording this right now, I am sitting in Columbus, Ohio, in my hotel room, prepping for a keynote that I have to give in just a few short hours. And Des literally just landed from South Africa yesterday. So her body is like in a whole other time zone at this point in time. And I was telling Des as we were prepping, I was like, "Sister, I know that there is at least 1 or 2 times I'm going to quote you on stage today." Because when I think of Des, these 3 things come to mind. Okay, TSRW, which Des will tell us what that means. If it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. That has changed how I make decisions personally and professionally in so many things. So I'd love to
Mm,
dig into that today. And then how you do anything is how you do everything. And also a fellow favorite, Jess Sims from Peloton. She says that a lot on her Peloton
she
workouts, but
does.
I remember hearing it first, hell, probably 15 years ago from you, Des. So which one you want to start with? Which one you want to dig into?
Let's start with TSRW. And I will say this, that other than TSRW, everything that I say is typically borrowed from someone else, so I didn't invent these.
Well, I've heard him said so many times, and I originally heard them from Des, so I give her full attribution. So
Ah,
just own it.
I
Just
just
own
I
that part of
branded them for
it.
me in your
Yes.
world, at least.
Yes. Yes.
So,
TSRW, what the hell does that mean?
yeah, what does it mean? So, it evolved to a hashtag, TSRW, "This shit really works." And what it means, Amy, is for years, I somewhere along the line learned the power of what you believe you can create, right? And for years, I only really used things like visualization as an athlete. Years ago, I ran the Chicago Marathon, and I decided that I was going to visualize that race every day. I'd spend some time, whether it was mile 7 to 10, or if I was visualizing 18 to 21, I spent time imagining this race because I wanted to run a PR. And I'll tell you what, I'm running through the streets of Chicago doing the Chicago Marathon. And I literally, because I had visualized it so much, I couldn't visualize the streets. I'd never been on them, but I
Mm,
had visualized it so much. It was so surreal. I felt like I'd been there. And I also remember I would visualize up to 21 miles. Well, a marathon is 21.2. The last 2 miles, it was like running with 2 phone poles on as legs. It was like, "Am I gonna make it?" Point 0.2 miles. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, hardest thing in the world." And then it finally clicked. I'm like, "Wait a minute, why am I not using things that I learned as an athlete in my life?" And through books and things like that, I created a morning practice for myself, which includes visualization and gratitude, meditation, getting into the feeling place of already being and doing and having the things that I desired. And I would teach that system to clients. And I was driving down the road and I had a client call me on the phone and she said, "You are not going to believe this. And you're totally going to believe this. And do you remember I was visualizing and really practicing to happen?" And she said, "It just happened." And she's like I'm just like ecstatic. And she's like, "Des, this shit really works." And I was like, "That's it. It's TSRW." So that's where it came from.
So going into coach mode for a moment, kind of putting your coaching hat on, there's listeners right now, they have a goal. It's either personal or professional goal, and it's something that their heart desires, right? How do
Mhm.
you break that down? What's the how to, the step by step of putting together their TSRW plan?
That's great because, I have my system. I can tell you that. And then I think we'll look at what works for you. Like I think you and I have a few friends that like journaling's their gig. For
Mhm.
others, it's not. My my system, my morning practice is this is I when I get up in the morning, I'll spend some time in meditation. And this is going to sound like it must take you hours. I
Mm.
literally can do this in 10 minutes or less. but I'll spend some time in meditation. I get into a feeling place because our the cells in our bodies, just like, if you were to take an athlete to a human performance lab and you hook them up with all the mechanisms to monitor heart rate and physiological changes, there are studies that the same synapses fire as if they're actually running the race or doing their sport. So that feeling is so impactful to get into the feeling place of the things that you want to be, do, or have. So I'll get into the feeling place and then I'll visualize the outcomes that I desire, whether it's work or personal life. Usually for me, it's a blend. Like I'll visualize as if this has already occurred, then what's my life like? And again, the visualization I think can be tough for people. So even if you have snapshots of pictures, or maybe you look at your vision board if you have one, or some other anchor you can put into place to help kind of bring the picture together, because our brain likes pictures and symbols. So I'll visualize and then I will spend some time doing a few affirmations, and then I'll gratitude. And I may just simply write down what are 5 things that I'm grateful for. And that's what I use as my morning practice. That's my TSRW. And so I think there's a lot of steps, and I think that you could do a couple steps, and that could be enough to be able
Mhm.
to start to create that picture for yourself of where you're going. Because what is it you say all the time, Amy? Our eyes and ears.
Our eyes see what the brain believes.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it is that it's like see it, feel it, have it. There is something to that biologically. To your point, one of my I think stories that I lean back on is the story of Michael Phelps, where he's swimming in an Olympic race. And I wish I could remember exactly the race and exactly the swim that he was doing. But I remember part of his training was the visualize, do it again, do it again, do it again, just like you with your marathon. And at some point in time in the race, his goggles filled with water and he could see nothing. He couldn't see when the wall was coming close to him. So what he had to rely on was muscle memory, and he had to rely on his body to do the job that his eyes were incapable of helping him do. And when the race was over and he kind of climbed his body up and took the goggles off and looked at the screen, he saw that he broke a world record. And he attributed that to visualization. And the thing is, think of your body as the subconscious mind. If you use the conscious mind, the brain, to program the body, it's the same reason why we can drive home and pull in our driveway and have little recollection of how the hell we got there. We're like, wow,
Exactly.
God, I'm home already. I don't remember half of that drive. It's because it's so hardwired in our body that our brain can kind of it can do do its thing other places. And so I love that exercise of visualize it. Or to your point, Des, write it down. If you're not a visual person, can you write as if in journaling? It's such an impactful piece of goal setting or shifting or manifesting or whatever bucket you want to put it into. It's really powerful. And the feeling piece of it, I, I love that. I think that's the how do you get yourself in that mode of what would it feel like if I were here? What would I be experiencing? Would I be in joy? And then having the gratitude as if you already have it. And you mentioned affirmations. Along your TSRW, do you have affirmations that are just very special to Des? Do you have affirmations that are more contributed to the goal at hand? Where do your affirmations come from?
I started with affirmations. You can Google affirmations. And I started with affirmations that really I connected with.
Mm.
And over time, and I love what you said about journaling. Over time, as I wrote the story of my desires, I plucked out affirmations from that. I would say they're specific to me, and I'm sure there are hundreds and thousands of people that have this somehow landed on the same affirmation.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, to me, it is I like that it's a mix of, like, the woo, but it's also neuroscience.
Yeah. It's all science based.
Yeah, it sounds woo to a lot of people, but it is science-based. Tell yourself, what you wanna see and experience in the world. One of my mantras, I'll just share here, and I don't know where I got it. I did not come up with this. I heard it somewhere else, and it is, "Life is so easy. Life is so good. Only good things come to me."
Ah, I love
And
that.
I just repeat it as often as I can,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
even if bad here's the thing I think that's done for me. It's not that bad or inconvenient things never happen. It's just that I am not programming myself to pay more attention to that than I do the good things. And
Mm.
human nature typically has us leaning into the negative and the bad because it feels so good to vent, or to use another Cy Wakeman term, drive our BMWs around, which stands for bitching, moaning, and whining. It feels so good to do that and to make connection based on the negative, all while longing for a more positive, uplifting life. We got to do the work to get the outcome, right?
That's exactly right. We do default to the negative, and I think that the work that you do in the world is helping people to flip, like, build a conscious habit so that you're not defaulting negative and you're defaulting towards that be do have or positiveness.
Ownership. Own your shit. That's my that's really what it
Yeah.
is, hey, sometimes you may wanna just wallow in self-pity and be mad about something. You and I were just talking about, like,
Yeah.
sometimes we just need to you're like, "No, I'm not ready for your positive,
Yeah.
uplifting talk yet, so please don't." There's times we're like, "Permission to be pissy about this, please." But
Yes.
at least we know we're choosing it. Like, I'm choosing this, not I'm a victim to it. I'm choosing to still sit in the pissiness because I'm not ready.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, Amy, I just shared with you, I did not call you about something because I was not ready to flip the script. I was not ready to get into I wasn't ready to own my shit.
She's gonna Marianne Williamson me. Friends, listeners, here's the phrase I normally use when somebody comes to me. I tap into my inner Marianne Williamson, which, by the way, I'm looking to manifest her on this show too. So if you're listening and you have Marianne Williamson's connections, I will
Yeah.
use my visualizations. But Marianne Williamson has the phrase of, "Only that which I'm not giving can be missing from any situation." And so
Mhm.
when we are in a state of frustration, what's missing? Typically love and acceptance. And so that's what is encouraged to bring, but to Dessa's point, you gotta be ready.
Yeah. I
She's
knew
not
you were
ready
gonna bring
yet.
love and acceptance. I'm like, "No, I'll call Amy next week."
I need 5 to 7 business days to
Yeah,
process.
exactly, exactly. Well, so Amy,
Uh,
I will say something in regards to that. There's an Aboriginal tribe, and one of the rules that they have, so BMW, so if you have a grievance or something that happens, you can BMW about it, right? You can complain, bitch, whine, whatever it is, once, and then you can actually do it again. They're like, "Okay, we're good with that." And then they say, "Okay, the third time, if you attempt, we're going to take you to a cliff and we're going to hold you by your ankles over the cliff. And we'll give you the choice. Would you like to bitch, whine, or complain about this grievance again? Because if you do, then fine, do that. And we're going to let go of your ankles. But if you're ready to let it go, we'll pull you back onto land and you can come back into the tribe and the community. Because if we allow you to continue to hold on to that grievance, you're going to weaken us at our
mm,
core." And I try to keep that. I try. This is practice. Try to
mhm,
keep that
mhm.
in mind when I have something, because I like to say, "Hey, I'm Cuban. I will ruminate." I'm like could get an Olympic medal. Speaking of Olympic athletes in rumination, it's tough. Like letting it go, and I try to remember that because it's like let this go and don't tell the story more than once, which is why I
Mm,
couldn't call you.
mm. Ooh, I love that. But, to see that's self-accountability on that, which is like, "'Kay, I'm still
Yeah.
sitting here."
Yeah.
It's the, that reminds me, what a great way to hold each other accountable and self-accountable. I think it was in A New Earth when Eckhart Tolle tells the story of the monks walking along the river,
Mhm.
and As they're walking along, they see a woman struggling to pass. And so one of the monks says, "Can I help you across?" And she climbs on his back and he carries her across. And then she gets down. They wish her good day and they continue walking. And 2 hours later, the other monk turns to him and says, "We're not supposed to touch women. And you picked that woman up. I can't believe you picked her up and carried her across. Like, we're not supposed to do that." And the monk just turns to him and says, "Oh, you're still carrying her around? I put her down hours ago." I think that's the
Yeah, I
like, at some point in time, we gotta let it go. But I love this conversation because the purpose of conscious habit is interviewing people who give a damn. When I think about people who give a damn, Des is like top of the list for sure. And it's to talk about what are the different ways that we live out consciousness. And just to echo where we kind of started off with Des's example of what consciousness means to her, it's not about rainbows and butterflies. It's really not. Life is up and down. That's what makes it sweet. We wouldn't have the good if we didn't know or experience bad. It would have no definition.
Hmm.
And so it's just a matter of what are the tools we have to get ourselves through and to
Yes.
make the most of it as we
Mhm.
move through. And TSRW has been a great practice I've been able to adopt through Des's coaching. So grateful. Okay. So next, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. Where did that come from? Where did you hear it from? How do you live
Mm.
that out in your life?
I wish, Amy, I could tell you exactly who to attribute it to. I cannot remember his name. I believe I heard it from a friend. And I can tell you how it played out in my life is I used to be someone who would say yes to things that were not a yes for me. You know those moments where it's like, why, like I'm saying yes because I don't want this person to feel bad.
Mm. Do you have some examples of what your yeses sounded like?
Yeah, there was a business contact that I had, and we were talking about different things, and he said to me, I don't know, we were talking about jazz or something, and he's like, "Have you ever been down to this jazz club downtown?" I hadn't. He's like, "We should go sometime." And I, like, get very casual, like, "Oh, yeah, we should." In my mind, I'm thinking, this is no, I wouldn't, like, hang out with this person.
Mhm.
And he would mention it from time to time. And I bet probably a year, maybe year and a half passed, and finally, he called me on it. He's like, "We've been talking about going down to this jazz," and he's like, "Let's go." And I'm like, so because I painted myself into a corner,
Mhm.
I felt obligated then because I had said, "Oh, yeah, we should do that sometime."
Mhm.
And I distinctly remember holding onto my steering wheel and thinking, "This is the last thing that I want to do with my time this evening." And it wasn't about him as a person, but I was like, "I did this." And this was not a hell yes. It is a hell no, but I didn't say no. And I also had painted myself into a corner. I was like, "I'm not doing." It was like the skies parted. I'm like, "I'm not doing this to myself anymore."
Mm.
And of course, shortly thereafter, I did it to myself, but in a much bigger way. I was dating and I mean, red flag after red flag, and I overrode it. I'm like, "It's fine. I'll do this. It's all good." And I like to say that as a Cuban, I need to get big lessons. They've
Mm.
gotta, like, pull the rug from underneath me for it to really sink in, and this particular lesson, it was, like, very, very, very difficult for me, and I was like, "Okay, I got it, universe. This is you saying that was a hell no." But I decided it's okay. It's a hell yes for right now. And that was enough for me to say, "All right, this is how you're going to live your life."
It's so much about learning how to be in alignment with your own integrity,
Exactly.
right? I've been sort of asking myself, like, do I feel in alignment with my own integrity right now? Whether
Mm,
it's something that comes out of my mouth and I sort of question, did I really mean that? Was that the truth? Was that the whole truth? Did I
mm.
add some stuff in there for whatever reason? And how have you learned how to tap in with that? Where does that come? Is that a mind thing? Is that a heart thing? Is that a gut thing? Where do you tap into that information for yourself?
It sort of depends upon the choice point.
Mm.
because sometimes it is very intellectual. And I would say that it is both. It's mind, heart, gut. Because some of those decisions, maybe on as a like intellectual exercise, it seems like a yes. And in my heart of hearts, I'm like, but not tonight or
Mhm.
not today or something seems off. And if I don't know, that's usually a no
Mhm.
because that's not a hell yes. Right.
Mhm.
So it's like that's where it's that's where the hell yes comes in. It's like, I know you, we all know what a yes feels like. And so I do try to, if I'm having difficulty, what is it for me? Head, heart, gut.
I think those well, first of all of them have their own intelligence. Let's go back to the biology of it all or the neuroscience. We have gut cells, or we have neurons, I should say. We have neurons, brain cells in our gut.
Yeah.
And this is why gut health is so dang important. Brain fog and our immune system, so many things begin in our gut. And our heart has its own intelligence system, its own sort of neurons that don't mimic the brain, but they know that it has its own information pathways. And then obviously there's the thinking brain. And so the connection of all three of those can be really important. And I think it's okay to pause. A lot of times we feel like we need to give an immediate answer or an immediate response, and it's okay to maybe pause or sit with it. And I think you're right. If we aren't sure, if we are like, it probably is a no. I mean, that's
Mm.
my kids already know that that's how I operate. If I don't give them an immediate yes,
They're like, oh,
like
man.
what if I say we'll see or maybe, they're like, just come on, mom. Like,
Yeah.
just
Give me the no.
any talk tracks for listeners, Des, for people who have a hard time having tough conversations, or maybe they're people pleasers by nature, it's hard for them to say no.
Mm,
You're in a situation, someone's asking you to do something that you really don't want to do, but you're afraid of the no. Do you have any phrases that you use that
mm.
keeps everybody feeling okay?
I think one is for me right now, that's a no. And that could change. Because like, this happens a lot in the coaching I do for I have, you know, plenty of clients who do have trouble with no. And you actually said one earlier. You can say, "I'm unsure about my answer for that right now. Can you give me a day to think about it?"
Mm,
To create that space to then come back with your truest response.
mm.
And that can be, "Hey, for right now, that's a no for me."
Yeah, and, I mean, you've heard the phrase, like, "No is a complete sentence."
Sentence. Yeah.
It was my first word, so we always sort of joke in my with my mom. My first word was a boundary.
Yeah.
My first word was, "No." I know it does. She's like, "Yeah, that seems about like, Amy, I'll just tell you what I'm thinking. Tell you exactly how it is." I think it's helpful, I mean, to just, yeah, no, thank you. "Hey, thank you so much for thinking of me, but I'm gonna pass for now." And letting it be okay. I recently had to say no to something that somebody had asked me to step up and do. It would have been a lot of work to take on. And I felt initially like, oh, I should say yes to this. And the
Mm.
minute I put the should with the yes, I was like,
Oh.
no, I need to hang on. Let me just really assess. And it took me a day or so to get back to them, and I was just very honest of, I don't believe that I can give the time and energy and effort that's necessary to make this successful. And therefore, I'm going to
Mhm.
have to just bow out, and really grateful that you thought of me. And I've had to do that on I actually have had a few emails where I've had to share that recently of people who are giving asks. And in the end, the greatest good is done when we remain authentic in our answer. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Going back to the story I told about going to the jazz thing, I sat there in resentment.
mm,
I resented him. I resented myself. Plus, this was like before we had the smoking ban in bars. So I was
mm.
miserable.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not a smoker. The whole place was full of smoke. So for someone that does have difficulty saying no, it's like, you can't probably bring your best self
Mhm.
to those experiences or situations or whatever it is, dinners, parties, just spending time, if you're not there, to your point, Amy, authentically. It's not serving them or you.
No, and you cannot be more committed to someone else's happiness than you are your own.
Amen.
Otherwise, that is the birth of resentment.
Amen. Yeah. Yeah.
This is so good. We could make this like a 2-hour conversation, but I want to hit on topic number 3 before we get into our high vibe discussion. And that is how you do anything is how you do everything. And again, would love to hear, where has this come to light? Where was that aha for you? And how do you keep yourself accountable? Maybe even coach other people to be accountable to that radical self awareness.
I think it can be somewhat easier to look around your life and see it in others, and it's
Mm,
so powerful to be able to see it in ourselves. So where, how you do anything is how you do everything comes from. So as you know, Amy, I do a lot of team building,
hmm
experience based learning. And that's literally where that came from, is being in recognition of how we do the things that we do is a reflection of how we're doing all the rest of life. And it's interesting that I get pushback on this in the business context. They're like, "Oh, no, 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 I'm very different at home."
mm,
And I'm like, Same candy, different wrapper."
mm,
So
mm,
if we do pay attention to that maybe that ribbon or string of consistency, we can see how we do approach things very similarly in different aspects of our lives. And you talked about authenticity. I think being in alignment and having credibility, just really paying attention to that can help us to be our truest, most authentic selves. And it can also give us some insights into others.
mm.
This past week, I was looking at just I was in South Africa with some girlfriends and just looking at the different ways of how we were all staying in the same house, how we live, what our rooms look like. And it was very, one of my friends is incredibly organized. And every single day, like everything, there was never a thing out of place in her room. She kept her consistency that she has at home. And some of us were like, "Oh, some stuff is over there." I kinda ran in and ran out, and just looking at how I'm like, yeah, sometimes my life is it's balanced from the perspective of, it's okay if my house is a wreck because 'cause I'm in my bliss doing the work that I love. And then when I have that chance, it's back to, like, having a little more cadence and structure. In a lot of ways, my life is that way, my business is that way.
I think there's so many avenues you could put in the bucket of that how you do anything is how you do everything. It could be organizational, and that's so fascinating because I think it's a reflection of what happens in our brain, right? Like my spaces often looks like a bomb blew up, and so that tells you what's happening in Amy's brain, which is
Yeah.
why I have to meditate as often as I do, okay? When people are like,
Yes.
"You meditate for 30 or 40 minutes every morning?" I'm like, "Yes, that's a requirement
Yeah.
for me
Yeah.
because this is what I'm dealing with up here." And I think it's also like you could look at areas like accountability. If you're somebody who it jumps in and takes great accountability and ownership at work, it's likely that you show up that way in your friendships and in your relationships, and it bleeds through in everything that you do. And I love that. I've never heard that phrase, same candy, different wrapper. It's going to be consistent. If you are somebody who gives up easily, and this is where Jess Sims on
Mm,
Peloton, Jess Sims always says, how you do anything's how you do everything. So in the context of, if you give up on yourself early in this workout, how else are you setting that precipice for in the rest of life? Is that going
mhm,
to happen and bleed into other areas of life? So our grit, our determination, our
yes,
ownership,
mhm,
remaining authentic in who we are, owning our shit, all of that it bleeds through in everything that we do. And I think it's worthy of curiosity
yes, yep,
in just seeing, does this serve me? Does it serve my highest good? Does it serve the highest good in the relationship of others? And figuring out what you want to either amplify or decrease can be, really helpful in living a conscious life.
absolutely, and I love the connection you made, Amy. I remember, I used to adventure race, and one of the things that I loved about it was, can I push my body to this physical place that is somewhat impossible, racing for 48, 52 hours.
Mm,
And I'm like, if I can do this, what does it show me that I can do in other areas of my life? And so I love the connection you made. If you can make your bed in the morning, that can create, if you can do this, it's like, oh, there are some other things that translates to in the rest of my life. That
mhm.
commitment and maybe that ownership, that responsibility of doing that.
Yeah, it's so easy not to connect all the dots and, like, just to look at everything as it is its own little bucket or its own little vacuum, and it's not true. Everything is truly connected as we go through life. And so I'm just grateful that those three things I've learned from you and you do live them. Des is not somebody who's like, well, this is what I say. However, I live this other way. I think when I consider people who live in full alignment of like they are who they present themselves to be, Des is on the top of that list. You're on the
Mm,
top of a lot of lists, Des.
yeah, I try. I try. So maybe, Amy, I should come back and let me talk with you about all of the things that
Mm.
you've taught me.
Some of our funnest times, I will say, has been collaborating with High Vibe Tribe. And for listeners who don't know, Des and I co-facilitate a retreat that we dubbed the High Vibe Tribe Retreat. It's a women's yoga and meditation, but it goes so much deeper than that. It's a soul connective, soul restoring, healing retreat that we are so lucky to be able to do with incredible women. And we'll be hosting our third retreat in Sedona this October. And can we just talk a little bit about how this came to be?
Yes.
Do you remember like when and how the conversation started?
It started as, well, Amy, we should do retreats. I'm going to take credit for putting that out there for the
Hmm.
first time. I
Hmm.
don't know if it's accurate, but I just said it first. And I think you said, "Yeah," and then, like, we would say it again, and then you should pick up the story from here because I love your version.
Well, I mean at the time, the audacity I had of believing we could do this because I'd never been on a retreat before. I mean, but Des and I started talking about big dreams and what might we do, and she threw out hosting a retreat, and I was like, oh my gosh, yes, that would be incredible to like do a retreat in like Bali, or that's amazing. And at some point in time, because here's the thing, if you hang out with Des long enough, she's gonna make sure that if you say it, you do it. And I think by the third time we talked about this, she was like, let's do it. And I'm like,
Otherwise, I have to hold you by your ankles.
right. Are we going to do this or not?
Yeah.
And Des has taught yoga for many years. You've been a yoga teacher. How many years?
I'm probably coming up on 10.
And Des and I both became certified meditation teachers around the same time, I
We
would
did.
say. And so we were like, how do we put it to use? It was the big leap. I sort of jokingly say, but it's not really a joke. It was a major ass pucker moment when we
Oh.
said yes to this. Because we started getting in conversation. First, we hopped on a Zoom call with a friend who had done retreats, and we're like, tell us about it. And she starts saying, well, you have to all this coordinating and people lose their bags and you got to do this and you got to do that. And Des and I look at each other and we're like, oh, hell no, we are
Yeah.
not.
It went from a hell yes to a hell no.
It went to a hell no, except for that friend also recommended we reach out to Sarah Reuter, who has become the Trace Libres. I know Libres actually means freedom in Spanish, but we're the three Libras. And we talked to Sarah, and she became very important part of bringing this retreat to life for Des and I to host. She is the glue to all of this because when someone does say, I lost my bag, we look over at Sarah and we're like, oh, Sarah,
Good.
this isn't yours. But the big scary leap was what a lot of people don't know. And I've talked to people who have dreams of hosting a retreat is you have to write a big scary check.
Oh, yeah.
You got to write a check saying, here it is. And oh, guess what? If we can't sell this out, we've got to write an even bigger, even scarier check because we are on the line for all of these things that we've reserved.
Yeah. I remember thinking, okay, well, if this doesn't work, Amy and Sarah and I are going on a very, very expensive vacation.
To Costa Rica. And what I love about this is what we did not know is we locked down one of the world's most incredible retreat centers. Like when you think of the best that host retreats, they're doing it here. They're doing it at Blue Spirit
Mm,
in Costa Rica.
mm,
And I think 2019 is when we wrote the big scary check. We said, we're going to do this. We're going to host
yes.
this retreat. And we had a lot of women that jumped in and said yes. And then 2020 came and that didn't happen. And thank God for Sarah because she helped us reorganize, restructure, get it moved to 2021. And in 2021, it was life
Life.
changing.
Truly, truly life changing. It is an example of the power of setting an intention.
Mm-hmm.
And the magic of it happened through that intention setting. Like Amy, I think we're like, we're going to create some framework and then we're going to let magic happen. And it
Mm-hmm.
did. Blew me away.
It's, Des and I came up with the name, and I don't even know where the name came up. I mean, we're High Vibe Tribe Retreats, and we had one rule. The rule of High Vibe Tribes Retreats is, well, there's two, okay? Got to be female, okay? Because when you come, we want to make sure that we're keeping like the female vibe going on, and you can't be an asshole. Those are the rules. But it doesn't. We don't care if you've ever done yoga before. You don't have to know what
Exactly.
any of the asanas are. You have to own no Lululemon, okay? We don't
Right.
care. We don't care if you've ever meditated before. You do not have to hug trees and eat granola. All are welcome. You
Right.
just cannot be an asshole. And so when we came up with the name High Vibe Tribe, what was so incredible was to see it in action. Des and
Yes.
I, both Costa Rica and Tulum, we were just like happy parents that were like, look at how much they love each other. These women who are strangers, look at them loving and crying but immediately being supported. And I have goosebumps right now just talking about the love that has been exchanged in these groups. How do you describe it to people? Because we come back and people are like, how was your retreat? It's so difficult to put into words, I find.
It is. It very in similar terms, like it is one of the most impactful, restorative, motivational, inspiring experiences that I've ever had. Like I've ever had. So as a retreat leader, we're giving, and I haven't figured out how to out give what we gain.
Mm,
And from the participants' perspective, hearing them and seeing them evolve the way they do, it's the reason I'm on the planet, to make a difference and to watch that in the span of 5 or 6 days. That's, I think, the game changer for us, Amy, is like those like just having our hearts crack open to see that everyone else is getting the same vibe, and it truly is shifting how they go back and do life from that
mhm.
point.
What's so incredible is to be able to do this with you, first of all. Des is an excellent collaborator. She collaborates in so many areas of her life and business. And I, on the other hand, have been somebody who's like, nope, I got it. Collaboration has not been a part of my business life, I should say. No, I mean, it is, but in different ways. And co-facilitating, I should say, more than collaboration, because collaboration is all over what it is that I do in my business life, but
True.
co-facilitation. And Des has been an expert co-facilitator for a long time. She's teaching me how to be a better co-facilitator, but it's so fun to bring both of our styles to the table and to provide a space of deep healing in areas that many women didn't know that they needed. It feels like such a gift to both give and receive, is to see that, because what we're working on all of our retreats is teaching people how to tap into and connect with deeper parts of themselves that we either forget about or we didn't even realize was the center for everything else that is created around us. And as women, I think we're so used to doing and pouring and giving that we forget, who am I?
Mm, that's exactly
Who
right.
am I outside of these roles? Where is this connection to me? We're so used to connecting to everybody else. So, truly, just my favorite time of the year is to be able to do these.
Me too. It is just a pure highlight of
Mhm.
my life.
So, Sedona, there's a few more spots left.
I think we have maybe 2.
And we're also in conversation about doing a virtual high vibe tribe for people all over the world who are not maybe able to take the time away. It's hard to travel when you have little ones, or it's hard to get away from work at times. And we're talking in conversation about how do we bring the work that we're doing, this deep healing, deep connection, the TSRW, the if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no, the own your shit. How do we bring that to a broader audience? So stay tuned for what may be unfolding in those areas.
I'm so excited about everything you just said.
Okay, so as we wrap up today, if you could give some advice or stand on your soapbox and just be able to share for the whole world to hear, what is it you hope people would listen to or take in? Do you have a message?
I think the message is this, and I had someone that I was coaching once, and I said something, they're like, "Well, that sounds kinda trite." I don't want this to sound trite because I think we've heard it in different versions, and that is that you truly do have within you more potential than you realize. And I think that's a big part of your work, Amy, with Conscious Habit is, that level of consciousness, and to just, to the extent that you can, trust yourself,
Mm.
because you truly do got this. You got this.
Before we wrap up this episode, here are my 3 takeaways from Des and how we can incorporate them into our lives. And these 3 are going to be easy because it was the main 3 of the podcast. My favorite things that I've learned from Des, the Des-isms, if you will. And we got to kick it off with the TSRW. This shit really works. At the end of the day, we can only control so much. How we think about things, how we respond to things, the actions that we take. And so often we focus on the uncontrollables. And what I appreciate about TSRW, given that I feel my life's mission is to help teach the world how to own their shit and live more consciously, is that it's all about the controllables. If there's anything I want in life, whether that's a more fulfilling relationship or specific goals or just a way of moving throughout my day, I can control that. And I can program my mind and body on how to respond simply by taking 5 minutes, sitting still, visualizing what I desire, feeling the emotion in my body, and allowing myself to be open to receive it. Number 2, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. This is such a great way for us to remain in authenticity with our answers. Because if we give somebody a yes and we don't really mean it, who wins? Our energy wrapped around that yes is not going to feel good to the people that we end up interacting with. If we say yes to a project, it's really hard to pour our entire self into it, all of our love, if we end up doing it begrudgingly. And lastly, how you do anything is how you do everything. I love Des's phrase of your wrapper might change, but the candy is the same. I have already requoted that since we recorded our podcast episode. It's such a great way for us to just reflect again on what we can control. I'm so guilty of putting my focus too often on the things that are outside of my control and not giving enough credit to the things that I can. Y'all, it is my therapy as much as it is my platform. So, how you do anything is how you do everything is a chance for us to deeply reflect in different areas of life. What are the things that are currently serving us, the behavior, the attitudes? How do we amplify that? And what are maybe those behaviors or attitudes that are not serving us? They're creating roadblocks and barriers into the things we deeply desire to experience. And how can we bring self-awareness and self-regulation to those things? Thanks for listening to Conscious Habit, a show from the People Forward Network. If you have questions for me or our guest, or you're looking for more ways to just live or lead more consciously, head over to Facebook. We have a Conscious Habit community there. Let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, do the world a favor and go love yourself.